In 1991, the Progressive Congressional Caucus was formed, and its roster of members now includes over 70 representatives and 1 senator. Their power and influence is reflected in the fact that half of all House standing committees are chaired by members of this caucus. These politicians may be the most outspoken and radical members of the progressive movement, but they're not alone. There are plenty of others in Congress who share some of the basic ideologies but don't publicly declare themselves progressives. For example, consider former President George W. Bush's defense of the massive wealth redistribution that took place through his Medicare prescription drug benefit plan Part D. Quote, "If you're a low-income senior," he said, "the government is going to pick up a significant portion of your tab. If you're an average income senior, you're going to see your drug bills cut in half." Of course, when Bush said that the government would be picking up the tab, he really meant that the tab would be paid for by American taxpayers and their children and grandchildren. When Hillary Clinton was asked if she was a liberal during the nationally televised presidential debates, she responded that she preferred, quote, "the word progressive, which has a real American meaning, going back to the progressive era at the beginning of the 20th century, end quote. She went on to say, quote, "I consider myself a modern progressive, someone who believes strongly in individual rights and freedoms, who believes that we are better as a society when we're working together," end quote. That should have been a marching order to Americans to go back and read the history of the early 20th century progressive movement. Even John McCain, the conservative candidate, once said that Theodore Roosevelt was one of his favorite presidents. And you still wonder why it feels like elections offer us no real choice. These candidates may come from different political parties, but their philosophy of the government's role all came from the same corrupt well. The presidential election of 2008 was truly a repeat of the presidential election of 1912, in which America was really only offered a progressive Republican and a progressive Democrat as candidates. Parallels between the words and actions of our current president and those of our progressive forefathers aren't hard to find either. Woodrow Wilson once said, quote, "We must demand that the individual shall be willing to lose the sense of personal achievement and shall be content to realize his activity only in connection to the activity of the many." Wow, that's spooky. And sounds eerily like President Obama's campaign answer to Joe the plumber, who is worried that his taxes would rise. Quote, "It's not that I want to punish your success," Obama told him. "I just want to make sure that everybody who is behind you, that they've got a chance to success too. I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody." End quote. As I said before, progressives didn't simply want to create a new party, they wanted to usher in a new form of government. After all, elected representatives were fallible because they were selected by ordinary people instead of those trusted experts. But those aren't just words, they were a call to action. The progressive era was an immediate manifestation of that call, but it was far from the end of it. Over the last century, progressives have successfully moved our country towards more government control and less personal freedom, and they are still pushing the envelope. I want to be clear here. Progressives are not doing this as some sort of a master plan to take down America. In fact, it's just the opposite. They love their country and genuinely believe that this is the best way forward. The problem is that there are fewer and fewer people able to stand in their way because we don't teach real American history anymore, let alone the real history and vision of the progressive movement. The principles of freedom and liberty and the beliefs of our founding fathers have basically been whitewashed from the curriculum, leading to generations of Americans who have no idea what people like Wilson or Teddy Roosevelt really stood for. The progressives view the Constitution as a living organism that evolves with time and changes depending on circumstances. Both the progressives and the Founding Fathers view the Constitution as a set of handcuffs. But the difference is that our founders believed that it was the power of the state that was to be cuffed, while progressives believed it was individuals who were cuffed to the greater good of the group. One of those two positions will eventually win out, and that will dictate how future generations will live their lives. The battle between these two philosophies is taking place right now in all areas of our lives. But there are a few key issues that progressives are using to drive their agenda forward: the environment, gun control, education, and religion. As we go through each of them, consider how our leaders have bypassed the idea of massive overnight change in favor of reshaping our opinions slowly over time, a concept that James Madison warned us about well before progressivism had even been given a name. Quote, "I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpation."